Well, thank you guys for coming out here today. I'm really excited to be speaking to you. This is one of the things I've wanted to do since I was like 15 or 16 years old was actually teach a college class. And you guys are kind of a step beyond that even, where you're actually into your discipline and actually going after a bunch of things that you want to do for yourself. But before we begin, I'd like to take a moment of silence. For those of you who have already heard, Leonard Nimoy passed away. And in his performance of Spock, he gave a lot of us who have that kind of over-rational, out of touch with your emotions growing up, a figure to appeal to and remember. And so if you'd join me for a few seconds. Please shut up, phone. Thank you. All right, let me mute that. All right. All right. Thank you. All right. So my name is Alexander Brazie, and I'm here to hopefully help you guys learn a few of the things that well, let's be straight here. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and my hope is that by sharing some of them and some of the things I've learned from making those mistakes, a few guys might be able to avoid some of those mistakes. And, I'll be honest, as I was flying on the plane over here, I wasn't even sure if the talk I was giving here was the right talk for you guys. And so before we begin, I'd actually like to go and ask a few of you guys. Let's have the guy in the red shirt in the back. All right. Yep, that's you. I'd like the guy in the hoodie on the far left with the blue water bottle. Thank you. And let's pick you with the long hair on the second to last row. I want you guys to tell me why you came here and what it is you're hoping to learn today. Yes, that's you. We'll start with the gentleman in the red. So speak loudly.
Cool. So I come here to FIEA, and it was on the docket, and I really like Riot Games and what they do.
Yeah.
And so I was just excited to hear about what you have to say about their business and kind of how they operate comparatively to other game industry workplaces. Whether you have been in multiple places and could give that experience or just give a brief description of the culture there.
Okay. I want to hear about the culture at Riot Games and the business.
Yeah.
All right. How about this guy over here?
I knew Blizzard is a famous game company, so I come here but want to learn something from you about Blizzard.
Okay, you want to learn a little bit about Blizzard. Okay. And how about you in the center there? Speak loudly, please. Yes? Yeah, you.
I'm trying to get into this program in the fall, so I'm just a candidate.
Okay.
I will be a concept artist for games.
Oh, you want to get into concept art for games, and you want to check out FIEA and see if it's the right place for you. Well, that's awesome. All right, so all of you guys are coming from different places. Some of you are attending here, future attending here. Some of you know what I've done most recently. Some of you guys have heard of the stuff I've did in the past. Well, I'm going to be kind of honest. I'm probably one of the most spoiled designers in the history of game development. I started out as a game designer at Blizzard Entertainment about 8 years ago, maybe 8.5. And I joined there because of some awesome modding work that I joined on with my friend Justin Kreitz. And I did a bunch of awesome modding, got a great lunch interview with Blizzard. They said, you know what, let's just see if it works out and join us. And then after that, I got to join Riot Games, where I did game design and a lot of development stuff. It's funny because when I stand here, I look like a single person, right? And it's easy to attribute the things that I've done to my own personal victories, accomplishments, and decisions that I've made along the way. And there's a lot of that there. There's a bit of factors in there that says that I've had a big impact because of stuff I've done, but the simple truth is that it's the people that have been around me, the people that have supported me, and the people that have helped me out over the years. I've had some amazing mentors in the name of Tom Cadwell, Alex Afraziabi, Tom Chilton, who some of you guys heard about a year or two ago, who have all helped me grow as a person over time. And there's even a whole bunch of invisible names that I'm actually going to talk a bit more in a few slides. And if there's one thing I can say, it's that success doesn't come from working alone. And doubly so, failure, on the other hand, can. All right? I've had the benefit of a lot of people putting their faith in me, working through projects. Some of those projects have been extremely successful. Some of them have turned out not so well. And, looking back on that, I'm really sorry to say that the ones that succeeded the most were the ones where, people gave the ideas and I was listening carefully. And the ones where I failed the hardest were the ones where I wasn't listening, where I wasn't putting the priorities and needs of the people on my team above my own. So let's get into it. This talk is about perspective. If there is one thing you take away today, all right, aside from the fact that the needs of the other people that you work with are the most important thing on what you're developing, it's that your ability to move your perspective, attention, and awareness to the position of other people is the most powerful skill you have, not as a developer of games, but as a human being. There is nothing more destructive in this world than a person who can't see beyond themselves. This is an uncomfortable truth, but it is one that I've seen repeated throughout my life. But you might be sitting here wondering, who the hell is this guy? Why is he talking about this? And let's go into my background for a little bit here. And I hope you'll forgive me for indulging upon this. So the things we're going to talk about today are who I am, why I'm up here, perspective and empathy and why they're so important, the importance of a team and the team that you work on, and finally, the difference in how game development has changed since I was 8 years old playing Bubble Bobble in, pink onesies in front of my parents' computer in the late 80s and today. So, who am I? Well, when I was a kid, I pretty much looked like Dwight Schrute. All right. Grew up on a wonderful rural community known as Newark Valley, to a wonderful mother and father who were a computer scientist and a law student. And I got into video games because in college, a friend of mine invited me to work on play World of Warcraft and alpha test it for him. And I had the wonderful opportunity to actually go ahead and make changes that went directly to the players of that game, which was an incredible experience. And while I was doing that, I slowly started to learn that bringing value to people is how things start to snowball. As people wanted to use the modifications and tweaks that I'd made to the game, our audience grew and grew and grew. And then it went from just being me and Justin to, I think, a team of 8 to 12 people, at which point they had more influence and sway around the success of our add-on project than anything I did day to day. And then I went to Blizzard, where I was most affectionately known as being the sparkly, warlock-loving vampire thing. I don't remember. This was really funny when I wrote it on the slide, and not so much now. All right. And then I went over to Riot Games, where I've worked as a technical wizard lock, if you guys read it in the forum threads, which is basically a way of saying that I've kind of got this mix of design, technical, and creative talent mixed together that doesn't really land well within a title. And now I'm working as an independent game design coach, where I take people who are really focused and driven around learning game design, and I work with them directly one-on-one to help them learn the things they need to do to grow and change as individuals, to become the type of person who can be a great game developer. So what have I done in the past? The big one is I made dungeon raid bosses, things like Shade of Iran, Flame Leviathan, XT002 Deconstructor. I was fortunate enough to work on Death Knights with Greg Street back when he and Tom Chilton were developing the class. I got to do a lot of the talent work and some of the initial rune systems. You guys who play World of Warcraft may have heard of the pet battle system. I got to do the combat engine there. I also worked on the Warlock revamp, which is probably my most famous project, which was where we threw out the majority of the mechanics on an entire class in World of Warcraft and took a year and a half to basically rebuild the class from the ground up, focusing around fantasy, expression, the abilities and the concentration of coolness within each ability on the class, and did some PvP battlegrounds. If anyone died in Wintergrasp, I'm sorry. I was at least partially to blame for that. And then most recently I did the Xerath rework for League of Legends. Okay? And if there's one theme to take away from all of these things, it's that overall I worked on game mechanics, game systems, and trying to understand what it was that players expected out of the game and translating that into action that the team pulled off. Or, in the case of a lot of circumstances, stuff that, the team had to cut out that I added to the game. All right, but the fundamental question here is, how many of you guys here want to be game designers? All right, there's a lot of you, okay? Tell me, black shirt, yep, put your hands together. What is game design about? It's okay, initial impressions are fine.
Good ideas, iterations.
About good ideas, okay? What about you, over here in the brown jacket? Or the gray jacket, I'm sorry. Yeah, game design is about designing games. Okay. All right, anyone else want to take a stab? What is game design? All right, you two in the middle. We'll start with the white jacket.
The experience.
The experience, good answer.
Well, keep the players engaged and enjoy their experience.
Keeping the players engaged and enjoying their experience. Okay, those were all fantastic answers. And all of them point to what you're about to see next, which is something I believe very strongly. I believe that the heart of game design is actually about connection, all right? The connection with a fantasy, the connection with a character that you're playing. It's about actually connecting not only with the game you're playing, but with the other people you're interacting with, playing with, and talking about the game with at the water cooler or around the desk before class starts the next day, okay? And that your role as a game designer, okay, more than anything else, is about understanding this connection that people make with the game that you're producing, okay? And that your job is to connect your personal goals to the goals of your players. And this is really important because it's not all about you, okay? And I mean that sounds incredibly obvious, but you actually only get to make a very small part of the impact of an entire game, all right? There are people covering you in terms of like making sure that the art looks fantastic. There are people who test the quality of your game. And then millions of people who will experience your games and talk about it, and they're all integral components of this overall experience. So your ability to connect what you want to what they want is vital. And as mentioned over here, fantasies and experiences, right? You need to understand what sort of dream it is that they want, what sort of thing it is that they have never known that they wanted, and understand how to connect them to that experience directly. And then lastly, is actually what strikes you as probably a really strange thing, is connecting those experiences into healthy growth and habits, okay? There are a lot of games that, for better or for worse, kind of are known for, they addict you and then keep you there forever, and they're just exploiting you to basically, pump money out of you, right? And the reason that our industry has gotten that stigma attached to many of the games that have come out is because they're not taking these experiences and making them focused around the life, health, and welfare of the players that they are creating their stuff for. But when you do, you will not only show a good faith that you have in your player base, but you will actually be help improving the world, all right? Think about it. Raid leadership is actually a skill that a large number of companies look for on resumes these days. Do you know why? This guy knows why. All right. Yeah, you're smiling. I'll say it though. It's because your ability to organize people, unify them to a set of goals, figure out problems and iterate together and get through, the tough times, is basically that fundamental core of management. And then the ability to look out for other people's needs, to give gear to the people that need it, assign the right people to the right positions, is the heart of leadership, right? That looking out for other people's interests, which is, by the way, if you've done leadership, you know that half of what you're doing is making people feel better, figuring out why Tommy and Joe keep fighting, and figuring out why that other healer is so stressed out and not paying attention to the screen, you know? And sometimes that means she's fighting with her boyfriend. Sometimes it means that, you know, he just, you know, had his cat leap onto his desk, and making sure that the raid team understands and works together through these problems, you know, has a huge corollary to the real experiences you're going to have in life. So this is a dangerous question. Who is the most important person in this room right now? Okay. And there's a bunch of people who would say different things. The rule of attention, you know, you guys are fixated on me, would say that I'm the most important person in the room. I don't know. I wouldn't say that. The rule of service. I am here to perform a duty of elevating you, teaching you something, helping you understand something just a little bit better, would imply that you are the most important people in the room. The rule of ego says that, well, whomever I am right now, I'm the most important person in the room. If I'm sitting over there, I'm the most important person in the room. And then the rule of equality says that we're all the same and that everyone's equal in the room. You know, everyone's equally important. And all of these are wrong. They're also all so right. And this is the giant conundrum that we have to deal with every single day as people going around the street. How do we weigh our importance against the importance of the person, you know, in front of us? How do we know whether that bum on the street needs our help and we're the person to bring it, or if they should be ignored so that maybe someday that they'll change their behavior, right? Or maybe they're just, you know, I don't even want to, there's so many examples in this, I could go on for way too long. And the simple truth is that a lot of this is perspective, right? Why do you evaluate yourself as important here? Why do you evaluate that person as important across the room? And if there's one skill that will help you no matter where you are, it's your ability to shift your perspective from where you are to where they are, to another person, okay? Because the truth is that it isn't about me. It isn't about you. It isn't about all of us in some sort of hippie equilibrium, and it certainly isn't about me as the selfish, you know, universal individual, right? It's actually about this system of interactions that we are all going through right now that together produces what makes this room, this moment important. And in the same way, when you're looking at games and game development, when you say it's about the player, okay? It's easy to say it's about me playing the game as the player. It's about whomever is on the other side of the screen when I'm developing the game is the important thing. But it's about the sea of players. It's about the experience those players have with each other, okay? If one person comes in and says, you know what, blah, I want to be angry and play this game and rage at people continuously, okay? I've been that guy. I've done that, all right? I've been the asshole in the room. It's not about just that one player. It's about all the players. It's about what that experience and impact has upon your game as a whole. And man, I feel like I'm getting way too high concept here. But you know, I want you guys to think about that sometimes the best way to help the player is to kick them out. Sometimes the best way to help players as a whole is to think about the needs of 9 of the players and not just the one. Or sometimes it's about understanding the special circumstances someone's going through and adapting and changing and growing. So let's do a little exercise here. We've got a case study. Which of these 2 people would you guys like to lead you? And we're going to take a hand poll at the end, so pay attention. Person A. Suffered regularly from depression and was prone to lashing out at people around him in anger. Publicly derided his opponents in newspapers. Sent military offers to imprison reporters who didn't comply with his demand to stop printing negative articles about him for 3 months. And at one time, attempted to silence vocal opponents with a direct duel to the death. All right, that's guy 1. Guy 2 worked long, hard hours to rebuild the economy of his failing country. Adopted the young daughter of his girlfriend. Regularly hired orphan boys into positions of government service and outreach. Was a well-published writer and was advised by what were considered experienced expert counsel of the nation at the time. How many of you guys want to be led by person A? Okay, just that one guy. All right, that's fair. Some people like interesting experiences. How many of you guys would like to be led by person B? Yeah? You ready to see who these guys are? Does anyone know? All right. Person A is Abraham Lincoln. Person B is Adolf Hitler. Okay? The point here being, look, limited perspectives are really dangerous. Okay? If you only look at a small series of bullet points and not a network and lifetime of behaviors, you're going to just see either the things you want to see or the things someone has selectively chosen for you. Okay? Looking back, as soon as I see these images, I knew which one I would choose. And for some of you, that may not be the same one you chose at the beginning. Okay? And it's because Abraham Lincoln was a flawed guy. He had problems. He had a lot of things he struggled with, fought with, and had to grow beyond. Adolf Hitler actually did some good things for Germany. It doesn't mean that Adolf Hitler was, a great impact upon the world. It doesn't mean that Abraham Lincoln, hurt everyone around him. A flawed past is not proof that they're going to continue to have a horrible future. And in the same route, having done good things doesn't mean that the impact you're bringing to the world is the right one. All right. So let's talk about how to have perspective, right? You need to understand what your players want. What is it that they're dreaming of that maybe they haven't realized yet in some cases, or what is it that they're going after that is so incredibly important to them? Next, you need to know how far can you take it, right? What are you capable of doing and pushing for that you can actually deliver on? And lastly, what is your team good at doing at, right? Let's say I'm a master chess player, but everyone else on my team, they're really good at Candyland and checkers, all right? Are we going to be having a great team if we're all making a giant chess game? Are people going to be happy, involved, and aware of the things that the players need for if we're all making the game that I want to make, but not the game that they know, they understand, and they want to make? Probably not. So let's talk about some core steps, some skills that you need to build up in order to help yourself work through this. And by the way, this stuff is really hard. All right, I am far from mastering this stuff. But working and being aware of it is how you get better, okay? And believe me, looking around you guys are doing better right now than I was when I was at my 3rd or 4th year in college, okay? You guys have an awareness of where you want to be. You guys are taking action. I've looked at some of the games on the wall out there, and they're actually kind of cool. There's a lot of awesome ideas there. And I was watching the Hookshot video, and I was like, oh, that grappling game actually could develop into something really awesome someday, right? You guys clearly have taken the action and steps you need to do to be developing yourselves. But right now, you're getting to do this the way you want to do it. The question I have for you is, can you grow yourself to be doing it the way that other people need you to be doing it too? All right, let's get started on this. Let's talk about the fastest way to fail, okay? And there's 3 big ones. First off, don't listen to people. This was the E-camera created by Konica back in late 90s. It had way too many features. It had like a TV camera, and I think it had a radio in there. People didn't know what to do with it. No one had ever asked for it. It was just, they were just like, hey, let's slam all these features into one little box, And man, people would totally want something that can take pictures, record things, and play sound, right? And clearly that's what people want, right? But this is a complete disaster when it made it to market. The other thing you can do to really fuck up is listen to all feedback, right? If you just take everything everyone tells you and try to do it, not so great. I'll let you guys look at this when I send the slides around to the FIEA later. But, if you just do everything everyone suggests, then you're all over the place. There's a scattered vision. There's no alignment, cohesiveness, or clarity to what you're trying to achieve, right? So that's no good either. And then after going through this, you're really like, I ignore people and they're mad. And I listen to everybody and it doesn't work. Then the opposite extreme, which is just ignoring your team and just working whatever is comfortable and easy for you. All of those are a crash course in failure, okay? You want to do one of those three things? Go ahead. Just do it for yourself, because you will crash and burn, and you will learn the hard way how painful it can be to not be making things for people. All right. But these skills I've described here, the way that you get through and understand these issues is really hard. It takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of patience, to get through this. All right, let's continue. We're going to go through an example here of something I actually did. Empathy is really, really hard, okay? I was working on the Xerath project, and someone on the forums sent this post around. And I'm going to just gloss over it. Don't worry about the details, the wording. But basically it said, hey, I'm really concerned about the new direction of this character. The goal of this rework is to make him more popular, but are you guys listening to the hardcore fan base? Because it seems like they're the wrong people to be asking about this character if you want to be reaching out and increasing the broadness for other people. I don't know if I have a lot of faith in this project. I've left that line. Kind of spoils this. And I came back and I said, hey, I understand, that you're really nervous about this. Heck, it's nervous and natural to be afraid. In fact, I was really nervous, thank you, keyboard, for that, about this too. And, and I talked through some of the steps that we'd gone through to try to make sure we were doing the right thing for the right people. And you know what? Someone else came back and said, hey, I was one of the people who was super negative on the board. I didn't think this could go well, but man, you're listening and responding and showing that you understand what we're worried about has really increased my faith in this project, okay? But what would have happened if instead I had said, dude, come on, look, I'm a pro, I've been doing this for years, just chill, it's cool, man. What would have happened? Just shout it out, what would have happened? Rage. What else? They would have kept posting. Yep. It would have kind of just been a fountain of frustration. And that's really, really important, because resisting people is not showing that you're taking the time to understand their perspective. Okay? There are a lot of players, and you can't have a one-on-one conversation with all of them. But taking the time to make sure that the few you do talk to and you visibly talk to in front of the entire audience of players, and that you are making the steps to show that you understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from there, before you explain why you've taken the action you take, goes so far into communicating at a level that they can kind of relate and understand. And this is putting their needs first, right? This is about thinking about how to communicate with them. When you're starting out, right, early design is very selfish, okay? What game do I want to make? What kind of abilities do I want in this character? Who do I want to work with and put on my team? It's about me. It's about me. It's about me. It's about me and what I want to do. And that's kind of cool. That's why early development is kind of fun, right? It's kind of exciting. It's kind of intriguing. But if you're going to stay, you can't stay there for very long, because once you figured out what you want to get out of it, you then need to understand how to connect it to other people and what they want to get out of it, right? What they are going to learn and grow from. And you got to shift that lens, that perspective, the focus you have. Start looking at what you've made. I've made something awesome. Here, Bob, play it. Why do the buttons stick? Oh, that's just some input bug. Just push the button twice every time you need to jump. It'll be cool. Don't worry about it, it's a little bug. But this is really frustrating. I don't understand what you're getting at, because I'm thinking constantly about this double button push thing, right? You have to be able to rigorously, fix the things that you're looking at in order to make it so that they can see the vision that you've put into it, right? You need to be able to understand, empathize, and close your mind and feel the sheer agony and frustration in their hands as they push the buttons to the controller, such that you can know how important it is to improve the experience in the game that you're working on. Okay? And the truth is that as you do this, things just get better. They get dramatically better. the game starts to improve and people start to see the ideas and the seed idea, you know. One of these awesome, I was just talk from a boy in the Netherlands who was part of an indie game studio that had made, they made Nuclear Throne and a couple others, Vanderbeek, I think, something like that, or Gerinder, I've lost the name. And he said, it takes us about 2 days to come up with the game, and then about 2 years to polish that idea to a state where we can sell it to someone else. And that's the truth. Those initial seed ideas are awesome. They're great, they're cool, and they're novel, right? Braid is more interesting because Jonathan Blow said, what if I made a game where the whole rule is you can rewind everything? But ideas don't count for much on their own. Ideas are easy. Execution is very, very hard. And so that's why, you know, that's why this job is difficult. That's why you guys are realizing as you go through the steps of creating your game now that, man, things are tough. Man, these ideas were not as easy to get out as I had hoped. Or things as simple as, you know, why aren't games just great when they first come out? And the answer is because they've had to make trade-offs. They've had to pay the price to take those few ideas and push them to the finish line. All right. And you know what? No one sees everything. No one is perfect. No single human being can find all of the flaws in what you're working with. It's only even after, I would say, 10, 20 years of working in an industry on a focused area that you can even handle your own work consistently, refinedly, and kind of have a good flow for what it is that you need to be doing, assuming you've been working the same thing. That's that old mastery rule, right? And, you know, the best ideas that have come in this industry are rarely made by one guy sitting in a room by himself. It's people talking, interacting together, thinking with each other, you know? And then as you push this idea in front of people and try it out, you get feedback and you work together and they give you ideas and you try things. It's in that frustrating, annoying, intense fire and pressure of development where the diamonds are made from this loose, easily crafted charcoal. All right. So let's talk about some stories and things that I've actually done. So here are 3 fantastic examples of things where I've been fortunate enough to spearhead successes. I did the Warlock Fantasy rework on World of Warcraft for the Pandaria expansion. And on this project, I actually started a year early by contacting 6 of the most hardcore English-speaking players in the world. And I got them into an email chat. I said, hey, tell me what the problems with this class are. What's going on here? Why are people evacuating this class? It had gone from being like 5% of the population to like 2 in the course of one expansion, which was Cataclysm Lich King, all right? And listening to those players and giving their thoughts and hearing about abilities are frustrating to use, and I've got to watch for all of these timers and all of these damage, numbers. It hurts my brain, and I can't relate and understand what's going on moment to moment. And it doesn't feel good. All the classes, all the specs feel the same. And I had the assistance and guidance of the class team at Blizzard Entertainment, right? Who, as I worked through these ideas, and we took the idea that we're going to give a core fantasy to each spec. Affliction will be about dots. Demonology will be about summoning and transformation. Destruction about casting giant-ass Kamehameha style fireballs in dragon heads, right? And through the core idea, a focused initial delivery, and then weeks and weeks of iteration, we made something awesome, all right? For Zareth, I spent about 6 months playing around with random ideas, just by myself in the engine, until I hit a couple that seemed to be pretty good. At that point, we actually had 2 partners named Mark Sassenrath and Daniel Klein. And for those of you who know them by forum names, that's Xenon the Stoic and Sassenrath. You picked a hard name, and I can't remember it. I'm sorry. I actually had a whole lot of things in there that were really precious to me, that were really, man, I really like this rapid-fire, super spammy ability as an ultimate. And at a certain point, I had to take my hands off the project and say, okay, guys, here, this is for you. Yeah, I think the spell penetration should stay, players are attached to it, but here, this is for you guys now. And I'd take my hands off. And as a result, they went through and rigorously removed all of the nitty-gritty rough edges that had been on this project that I couldn't let go of in like weeks. Weeks later, it was far cleaner, more precise. Each ability was crisp. The particle and VFX and art and animation were starting to align and work together. And that project turned out fantastically because they were not afraid of retribution from me. They were following what the game needed, right? Game didn't need a character with spell penetration. They were listening to what players wanted, which was big, intense hits on the ultimate, right? And by doing that, and listening and carefully refining all of the stuff that, don't get me wrong, when I started the rework, there was a 500-page forum post with getting rough ideas and trying to take the character. Them taking the same set of ideas and looking at it from a different perspective increased the quality of that character at least 30-fold, okay? It is a far better, more interesting, and better balanced character. It is one of the first releases that came out and has been stable at 51% win rate, which is crazy, by the way. Usually when a character comes out, it's like up in 55 or 60% or down in 40% for a long time because those guys work together as such an effective, efficient team. Same story with pet battles. Okay, pet battles was one day Corey came in my office and said, "Hey, I want to make Pokemon in the game." I'm like, "Pokemon? I love Pokemon, but inside World of Warcraft, how does that even make sense?" He's like, "Well, I was talking to a bunch of, my wife and a bunch of her friends, and they were like, they love their miniatures and they just wish they could do more with them." And I was like, "Well, I bet if we put something awesome behind it and kind of like actually made that an interesting game as well, we could probably get more of the player base, to buy into it too." And so we did that, and we started playing. We actually back in the any of you guys, how many of you guys played World of Warcraft? A bunch of you guys, Gurubashi Arena, yeah, that arena in the middle of Stranglethorn Vale. That actually was the original pet battle location, and we actually had spawned monsters in there that we had to individually mind control, run across the field, and have them attack each other, push an ability, and back as the experiment to prove to people how cool this idea might actually be. All right. And once Corey sold the idea to the rest of the team and they were bought in, we had a ton of programmers. The ones who come to mind are Darren Williams, Pat McKellar, Dan Reed also helped out, I think, at some point too. And the UI team, Matt Gollins in particular, actually went through and lovingly crafted UI. Corey kept finding people to bring onto this team and get this thing snowballing and rolling. We actually had an intern named Johnny Cash who started one summer, gave me just a list of ability names, came back a year later to do another internship the next summer, and he got to actually sit down and implement the abilities that he had come up with in the engine and actually create the quest lines for a lot of the characters that had started a year later. That was an awesome experience for him because it just showed me how far it could come in just a small amount of time. And then, I'm going to tell you, I kind of fucked up on this project. I believed that I could deliver on creating all the visuals for the game in something like 9 months. And so I was trucking at it. The programmers were backing me up. I was, working away at it. And I realized I was going to be about a month and a half over. And this guy named Jeremy Fiesel, also known as, sorry, Jeremy, I forgot your forum name. It's been a little while. I remember it's very lovely and it's cute, though. Came in and said, "Hey, I'll help you out." And he busted his ass for this next month, basically taking over the visuals while I went and handled combat system bugs. And if it hadn't been for that, the game would have been incredibly less interesting, way less climactic, and far less interesting. Okay? But, you don't get through life only having wins. I got a whole bunch of really, really bad examples, too. I worked on my first fight that I made and crafted myself as the designer was one called Shade of Iran. Okay. Now, there were a lot of things about this fight that were great, but there's this ability called Flame Wreath, okay? Well, when I was making it, I was like, I'm going to wrap 3 people in fire and they can't leave the circle. Simple. Great. Those 3 people have to do something special. Well, I didn't get it tested in quite the right ways, or when it was tested, I wasn't paying attention to the right things. And so I didn't click in my mind that if anyone walked through the ring of fire, the entire raid would blow up, okay? And we could go into how this happened. The TLDR is that I forgot to mark the target in the middle as the guy who can detonate it, all right? And so, that didn't have the eyes and attention of other people. They might have spotted it and given me the feedback I needed to say, hey, what happens if the rogue is just doing his normal thing and the ring actually spawns on top of him such that he doesn't have that time and space to respond, right? The next one here. When we were redoing the Warlock, it was really important to me that we try to diversify the class in a dramatic way. So I really didn't want Demonology to be yet another DPS spec. I wanted it to be a tanking spec, right? So I had this mission. I'm going to make a new type of tanking in the game. This class when I started out had like dodge rolls, and monsters could attack you, and you could step out of the way of the melee attacks, and had this really interactive action game feel. It didn't work at all inside the engine. But I stuck with it for a really long time, so much so that when we eventually made the call, no, the core of the spec needs to go back to DPSing, I couldn't really let it go. And so I released this glyph that, I'll be honest, I think it was probably a really cool glyph, and for the dungeon experience of the game, worked out. But the rest of the team was not bought in on what it was going to take to make the class into a tank. And as a result, I believe a bunch of the guys actually removed this glyph in the most recent expansion because they didn't want to maintain it. They didn't want to they hadn't bought in on the idea, and they didn't feel like it was the right addition to the game. And that was my fault, right? I didn't sell them on it. I didn't get their buy-in. I didn't get them on board with, hey, how exciting will it be to change the identity of a specialization within a class dramatically? And, actually it was Greg Street who came to me and said, Alex, I think you're just going too far with this. Make Demonology a DPS spec, because what do you say to the guy who used to be about, I send my demons into battle, and now he has to be tanking, and he doesn't get to send his demons around? And Ferry was very right? He was like, yeah, I'm taking away someone else's fantasy to create a new one. That's not really what a rework should be about. It should be about taking the ideas you have and expressing them at a richer level. Another one here is Lord Rylith. Any of you guys fight this guy? All right, a couple of you. The mechanic here was that you attack his feet, and he runs in that direction, okay? The idea was basically, I don't want tanks. I want DPS to be the stars of this game. I want DPS to be in control of the flow of this fight. And it was kind of cool, right? It's kind of neat and novel to corral a monster around an arena. But I didn't shift my perspective to think about the experience of each individual who was playing the DPS class and needing to basically switch targets and go through the motions of changing what they were doing in order to steer the raid in the right direction. So the UI for this was a singular bar. I was thinking like a raid leader. Raid leader needs to know DPS on the left foot, DPS on the right foot. Well, guess what? Each individual needs to know what foot they're actually attacking and what impact they are having upon the steering in order for an experience like this to be meaningful. And because I didn't do that extra step of showing each individual what their impact on the outcome was, people didn't know when they were accidentally, doing the wrong thing and causing their raid to wipe. And these are expensive examples here. Demonology tanking probably took 2 months of development time, right, for me to experiment with and try out, and then more for the team that had to maintain it after I was gone. Lord Rylith, we had custom art and particles and animation syncing stuff to make it so that the feet would stay in the right place and be individually attackable. And those features turned out to be reusable and useful in the game in other places, but probably were not the biggest bang for the buck right here, But people put their faith in me, and at the end of the day, I kind of did let them down on these topics. And if you want to be a game designer, you got to kind of own up to that part of your own responsibility. When you fail, you're letting your team down, right? And when you're succeeding, it's because they helped you raise it up, okay? That is why game design is bloody hard, because your job, more than anything else, is to listen, respond, and build trust, okay? That's hard to do. Okay, here's a couple other examples. There's easy things to listen to, right? There's listening to like, hey, I've wanted green fire forever. You just put it in the game and making that a cool experience. There's things like, man, this character feels clunky, and then taking action in response to it. And some of those are easy wins, right? Or easy relative, meaning that the amount of investment you invest in it is the amount of results you get out of it. But some of these things are harder, right? Sometimes the things that the Warlocks told me in the giant email chat that we had at the beginning were not the things we ended up doing, right? But they all indicated to an underlying deeper problem, right? That their fantasies, their goals, and the amount of things they were juggling were out of control and excessive for the entire class, okay? Same deal with League supports, right? The things we had to do when we worked on supporting in League of Legends, right? Where we changed up the income flow, the item, the play styles, things like that, were about not just doing like, some people are just like, hey, just give us more wards. Give us a wards generating stick. That's all we need. And turns out there's actually a lot more to it, right? What was the impact of increasing the gold income on the bottom lane? Well, it turns out that it changed the support player from being basically, an assistant in lane to being the dominant driving force in that lane now, where now they can be focused on interactions between players now, as opposed to avoiding last hits and pushing buffs and heals on allies. And that had a lot of snowballing impacts on the game, where you see now characters like Thresh exist, right, who are very high impact, high feeling characters in the game that came out of a lot of different people looking at the support experience and attacking from different angles. On the live team, we changed the mechanics and the income systems. Brandon Wenban, Certainly T, made Thresh and other support-like characters to try to change the game from, an identity standpoint. And if you do your job right, players will pay you back. And they pay you back in commitment, excitement, and passion about your products, right? This is, I think, 20 different pictures of completely different people cosplaying as Jinx, right? The audio and video teams at Riot made a fantastic video that if you haven't watched it, go look at the Jinx intro. That just kind of illustrated this awesome, compelling, exciting, kind of quirky and interesting character that people identified with and wanted to play. And so they joined the game. And, for the other people in the room, there's a lot of awesome male cosplayers now who love the heroic character of Tryndamere, and his strength and ferocity and never-ending fierceness. And if neither of those are interesting to you, then here's some bug guy stuff. Yeah. Number 3, call me later. All right. All right, let's try to start wrapping this up so we can get to the last portion of our presentation here. Look, game development has changed a lot from the way it was in 1990, okay? There's basically 2 basic huge ways to go in this industry: studios and independent development. So I have a heroic reading for you here. Once upon a time, great heroes of game development could handle all 5 elements: design, programming, art, QA, and production. All of that changed in 1979 when Activision attacked. The scope of games and budgets grew to compete. Now, in 2015, Notch, the last avatar of heroism, has fallen. Yeah. Nice, huh? Game studios, built from the powers of fire and hope, are now forged of multidisciplinary teams. And this is very true. Minecraft, and even on Minecraft, Notch had like 3 guys supporting him and helping him out a ton. It's probably the last really big game that has been made by one guy for the most part, right? That doesn't happen. That's not the way things really work anymore, right? It's your ability to work with other people that drives success across this industry. And so there's, 2 basic buckets for how you want to express yourself. So you're trying to, be creative. You're trying to express a unique idea in a different way. Then probably indie game development is for you, right? This is where you can take a single crystal vision and try to express it and take some wild risks out there. There's things like Terraria, Minecraft, Towerfall, all of these things that exist because a small team can get together and build them, right? Then there's expansive. These are the games that can reach huge, broad, amazing audiences. And, this is the turf of the industry giant. This is where the big developers who've been doing this for a long time get to succeed because they have the resources, they have the humility, they understand how to work as teams, and they know how to control and modulate their own emotions to work together well and be listening to an audience of that size and respond to the right things that group needs. That's the Riot Games of the world. That's the Blizzards of the world, EA and Valve, right? There's all these great studios out there that have succeeded by doing these things well to different degrees, right? Blizzard for polish, Riot for listening and responsiveness, Valve for, well, being Valve. All right. So to hone this in, I want to talk about this at an individual level. So there's the hero designer, the one great guy to do it all, and 3 people who work together, okay? Let's say that the heroic designer can make the right call 80% of the time. And the other guys, they make the right call 60% of the time. At a baseline level, that seems like, well, great, hero designer's going to do better, and those other guys that might get some more work done, but it's all going to be kind of shabby. And let's even say that the hero designer, he's even faster than the other guys. He thinks faster, works harder, puts in more effort. And let's even say the other guys, because they have to work together, they're 33% slower than an average single person, okay? So what does this mean, right? This guy works on his own, but these guys can catch each other's mistakes. And that's really, really important. So let's say out of 120 decisions, he's right 80% of the time. That means he makes 96 good decisions. Pretty sweet, right? That's like almost 100% against, let's say another designer who's trying to, chug away there. And let's say these guys, they work 33% slower, so they can only make 200 decisions. One guy makes 120 really good ones. The second guy sees the mistakes that the other guy made, catches 48. The third catches 20 more. Okay? Now that means the first guy has 96 wins. Fourth guy has 94 wins. You're looking at this and you're like, okay, yeah, a hero designer can compete with 3 other, reasonably good guys. But we're missing something. We're missing kind of the reality of the world we live in. Hero guy, if he gets sick, it all goes down to 0. He drops, his decision-making focus drops, not so great. If the other guys, when someone gets sick, they can cover for each other though, and they go down to 84% productivity, right? Or 80%, 4% good stuff coming out. This is the difference between independent development and studio development, right? You have people, you have support networks, you have things to help and catch and bolster you. I feel like this speaks for itself. There's no point in going on. So let's talk about it, right? You've got different problems and different things you need to think about as you go down each of these paths, right? For some of you guys, indie development will be the right call. You need to be, if you are really comfortable with massive uncertainty, not knowing where the next paycheck's coming from, but have the drive, vision, and focus, great, then go for that. In the industry, you need to be comfortable trusting and putting your fate in other people's hands on a day-to-day basis. In the independent development, you're going to work 2 jobs. You're going to be paying your bills and then working for yourself in the evenings making that game, working with a couple guys who also are taking their own time and energy to make that game. In the industry, you're going to be working to build the game with the instructions handed down to you or built up from the bottom, as some organizations go. And then the other job is going to be building relationships within that company, right? In both cases, you got to network. One time, you can do it to sell your game and basically shelf the product you've created. In the other, you have to network in order to find a position, an organization that works the way you work and help you be the success you can be. And in both cases, your success is driven by how hard, how creative, and self-aware you are. And you know what? No matter which path you take, the people you interact with every single day matter. They're the most important thing you can really be thinking about because they're the ones who will save you. They're also the ones who can burn you. A quick note about public presence, if you ever speak on behalf of a company, I've been really fortunate that Riot Games was very comfortable having me speak on their behalf to the players on a regular basis. Your word is only as good as you keep it, right? You create the identity, the trust, and the image for literally hundreds, if not thousands of other people who stand behind your work and your words. And so if you're going to take on that type of challenge, keep in mind that level of responsibility, right? One of my big failures at Blizzard wasn't taking that into concern. It was only kind of putting an emphasis on my work and my interests when I communicated with players. And at Riot, I realized the impact that I had is, the things that I did and said bubbled into other people's work and pipelines and things like that. But in the end, you guys get to choose your own adventure, all right? You get to pick which path you want to go down here. And that's the exciting part about where you are right now. You are standing here maybe a year and a half from this decision point. Which way do you want to go? Do you want to work for yourself and try for a cool creative vision? Do you want to become part of a team that will have great massive impact upon the world through creating a product that will reach a lot of people? That's cool. That's a really exciting opportunity in your lives right now. And I want you guys to think very carefully about that before you make that decision. It is 3 p.m., but I actually came here with a bonus. And so I'm going to ask if you guys want me to stop and do questions and answers now, or you'd like me to go over 5 questions that will help you dramatically improve your video game. All right? So let's take a vote. Who wants to just pause and do question and answers now? How many of you guys want to continue with the presentation? All right, cool. Sweet. This will be really fast. So I unfortunately did not have time to put images together for this piece of the talk, but this is really sweet if you're going to get into game design. Or even, honestly, even working as a programmer and artist, you're going to ask yourself these same questions. First one is, does the player understand what's in front of them? This is the power of clarity, okay? You guys need to go home, sit down, and play Nuclear Throne and Binding of Isaac. They're both 2D, top-down action combat games. But one is incredibly clear. Everything is well sold. The art is simple. Nothing is noisy on screen. The other is a deluge of particles, effects, and rapid-fire action. And the amount of mechanics that they were able to put into Binding of Isaac that they could not have fit into Nuclear Throne is dramatically different because of how clear the games are, you know? And if the player understands what they see and what they're interacting with, you can add more things. The next one, do your players care about what you're making? Okay. This is the power of purpose, motivation. And it's funny because when you hear people talk about motivation, and I could probably go into this topic for a really long time, the truth is that they've already got motivations, and this comes back to what I said at the beginning, which is you need to connect what's already motivating them with things they can do and express within your own game. Do you reward them for doing the right things and kind of punish them correctly for doing the wrong things? You know, at the end, if the answer is no, the player won't really care about any given mechanic you've put in a game, and you should probably just cut it. Does the player have a response? This is the question of how interactive is your game? Do you let people, plan things out, be proactive about the situation they're about to go into? Do you require them to react to things, and do you give them opportunities to respond to the events you create? If you play a game where it's basically Candyland and everything just happens to you, that can be a fun experience, but is that really a game? Players enjoy deep agency, right? Control and influence and impact upon their game and their world. And if you want to really nail this, create a situation where players can make things better, right? They get hit, but they get hit for less. Or they can see a giant ash arrow flying across some screen and dive out of the way. Or create situations where they can work together, or for example, warding in League of Legends is one of these proactive actions where you place wards across the map, and it allows the rest of your team to be more effective and make the right decisions. And when you create these, if you think about these through the perspective of not only the person doing it, but the victim of these abilities that you use, you'll create better shit. Finally, is that response, is the thing that you've let them do, really interesting and satisfying? And you can ask yourself this in 3 levels, right? How does it feel? How do they think and plan about it? And lastly, what identity do they have, and how do they express that fantasy within the game mechanics that you have here? Jinx, for example, her ultimate is a giant-ass rocket. She blows shit up. Xerath, a giant lightning creature who shoots abilities out. Demonology mages transform into demons and kind of replicate that experience of Illidan from Warcraft 3. And lastly, are you interested in finding out some more about this? If so, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I also have a design blog I update about once every 2 weeks. Or feel free to talk to me about design coaching if that's something that's interesting to you. I do weekly one-on-ones with direct feedback. And that concludes this talk. Thank you. All right. I guess, wow, we managed to get to that last section before 3, so we have time for Q&A. All right, I'm going to start from the back of the room and move forward. So, you.
So when you go through the design process and you catch things like when you have to take that step back and realize you've made like a mistake or that whatever you've designed maybe doesn't address all those questions properly.
Yep.
At what point can you say like, okay, it's too late to change this, or like how do you handle pivoting, even if it's really late in the project that you realize something like that?
Ask yourself what the impact of not pivoting is. Because it's actually not about time, it's about cost. Time is a type of cost. There are other types of costs. Sometimes you realize that, you know what, fear just is not a fun mechanic to experience. But we're 4 years down on this, we can't get rid of that ability. But instead we can mitigate the impact of fear by changing how you path while feared, things like that. The answer is that you can always pivot if you can get enough people behind it and enough time to do it. But if you can't, find ways of mitigating the negative impacts of your bad decisions. It's going to happen. Try to minimize it. In some cases, you just tune abilities down. We have some abilities in World of Warcraft or in League that are just really obnoxious. You tune them down. You reduce the duration of the stun. You reduce the damage that character does. I think they called it Olafing, right? Which is where they took Olaf, who was incredibly frustrating, and said, this sucks, but until we come back and clean him up, we've got to push this character down. All right, they did. So that's one way you manage it. Ideally, though, you're thinking about those questions and finding the right hooks to hit. Next. All right, Hat.
About how early did you say you noticed you were overshooting your 9-month projection and you had to make it about 10 months? How early on in the process did you realize that?
It was about 2 months from shipping. Now, Blizzard's really awesome in that, it's about shipping a good product, not about, deadlines. But even then, at a certain point, you're not going to stop the rest of the game to prevent one subsystem from being slightly better. So I believe it was about 2 months before shipping, we elected to cut a bunch of mechanics that I just hadn't finished visuals for, needed a bunch of custom technology for. We just shelved those, said, well, if we want them, we'll bring them back later. And then Jeremy came on board, and a whole bunch of people helped make visual kits. And so we were really fortunate that he was really passionate about helping, and it made all the difference. All right. Black shirt.
So I thought it was really interesting. You put a little bit of a focus on there on how there are times where we do fail, and in a program like we do have here, you get the opportunity to fail fast and fail often. And kind of create a pocket check as we go along. It's like as we approach new projects, it's all like, okay, here's the steps that we take to go moving forward. What would be some of the most helpful tips that you gained through those experiences that you take forward for your sort of pocket check out the door?
That the more vulnerable you can be with your team, and the more you can let them know about what you're weak at and what you're not as good at creating. For me, viscerality is a huge weakness for me. I don't have the experience of making things that just have that touchy-feely, super responsive nature that looks and feels good, right? I can create systems that have long-term engagement. I can create lots of in-the-moment combat interactions at like the 3 to 5 second window period. But things that are shorter than 3 seconds, I can barely perceive, let alone see, right? I'm the wrong person to put on frameworks or frame rate issues. But there are people who are incredibly talented at that. And so if you let them know, they can look at those areas more heavily and, hey, call you out when you have interpersonal weaknesses and things like that. That sort of transparency is the biggest tip I can give you, And here's the deal. Some people will kick you in the nuts about it. They'll be like, they will take you down. They will do everything to end your career over the things you're not good at because that's what they value and they think you're a threat to them. That will happen. But you know what? You putting those sorts of risks out there will mean that when you do find the group that will trust you, you're safe, basically bearing your weak spots to, you guys will make way better stuff together because an artist comes to you and says, hey man, I don't really feel good about this fantasy direction. I'm not really jiving with it, and then you grab other people and you be like, hey guys, I've been pushing we're gonna make, Legend of Zelda here, how do you feel about it? And people are like, actually, I really want to make Super Metroid. And you realize that that's what they need to do then you can pivot and have that conversation. But if everyone, this is the problem with the hero designer at the top as the ideal of game development. That doesn't exist, right? As the higher up you go, the less control you really have over a given project, right? Wyatt Chang, who's an awesome designer at Blizzard, used to say, as an associate designer, you basically run around the office with a water pistol. You spray it in everybody's face, but everyone just kind of wipes it off and mostly ignores you, except that you get kind of annoying. You get to a mid-level role, or maybe a senior level role, you get a 6-shooter, right? You get to throw a few bullets around every project and say, kill a couple ideas, or make sure a couple ideas happen. But when you're the lead of a project, you have a sniper rifle, and you've got 1 bullet, and you need to make sure that bullet fires on the thing that will either guarantee success or failure of your project, because you don't get to pull that kind of influence very often. The more vulnerable you can be and the more open you can be with your team, the faster you can find out about these issues before they get to a severity level where authority needs to come in and handle them. Because that's actually some of the worst cases, right? Because people then aren't bought in to the action of killing stuff. Whereas if you can communicate and get on board early, you're in much better shape. All right, other hands. No more questions at all? All right.
Can you kind of describe what it is like the day of the life of your supreme job?
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about life on League. When I worked on League, I would generally come in the mornings. I worked on my favorite team was the team known as the Strike Force team, led by Richard Huff. And there were about 6 of us. Me, 2 programmers, Samay, Tom Wang, Richard, and then a couple QA guys. Oh, and Brian Chen, who was an awesome tech designer. And we would basically get in a room, we'd look at a list of issues, and Strike Force was about what can we do in 3 days to make the game significantly better. And we would look at the list of things we were each working on and say, is this helping? When will this finish, right? Plan it out, we'd agree to what we needed to do that day, go and work, talk to each other. We all sat kind of like close to each other in the office. Make changes, and then when we felt stable, confident about them, send them to James, who was James Anderson was our awesome QA guy. And then he would kind of give the thumbs up, thumbs down to put them in the build. And then the rest of the company saw it, and then would immediately start flipping tables and sending you messages and asking, what is this new feature and why is it there? Or sometimes they'd be really excited, or sometimes you would send out emails to get like focus testing on it, things like that. That was a really exciting job because every 3 or 4 days your job changed and you had a different piece of the puzzle, and you always saw constant feedback and changes. So that was probably one of the most exciting pieces of work I did. Yeah.
Actually really curious. Generally speaking, you guys are pretty darn open with the public, with the community, as far as League of Legends, right? I'm kind of curious because sometimes you guys have to backtrack. I know that's got to be really frustrating in a lot of ways, but I'm just kind of curious, what actual methodology do you guys generally employ for your team for getting stuff from design to implementation to QA and testing and and so on?
Okay, well, I mean, the people lowest in the tree at Riot generally create most of the ideas, and then really it's about the people who are up supporting and helping their teammates pick the right ideas or helping them put down the ideas early that aren't as good. But backtracking is, ultimately it's about communication. The simple truth is, if you're going to be open and transparent with your players, you're not going to be able to follow through on everything you say you want to do. And you need to explain why you went through that process, It's about communication and clarity, Tell them what's happening. And the simple truth is, some people will be irate about it, but most people are actually reasonable human beings. No matter how... So when people are happy, they're generally pretty quiet. When they're really loud and noisy, that's when they show up on your forums. That's why people think that everything on the forums is horrible. It's not really true. It's just that those bubbles of joy tend to be more rare than the bubbles of frustration, and they need to alleviate it, right? But yeah, generally someone comes up with an idea, they sell it to their local team, then that team then goes to the other resource teams like art, programming, says, hey, we've got this idea. We want to do a girl who punches things really hard. And the artists then say, oh man, that sounds awesome. And then they come up with ideas and get their own buy-in, and they work things out, they bring it back, and then there's just a back and forth that leads to ideas snowballing. Though there is a formal process, at a certain point, the core ideas that are going to be the next big champions go up to executive team, and you're like, hey, we think this is right. Confirm for us that this is on the right path. And then sometimes we'll thumbs up, thumbs down it, or send it back to you to work on. But for the most part, it's about communicating what excitement you're going for, as opposed to, lots of, well, this isn't going to create revenue issues, right? Things like that. That's generally not what drives most of it. Yes?
So as far as design goes, have you ever been put in a position where like you had to design a feature or something that was totally out of your comfort zone? And if so, like how did you tackle that in order to overcome that?
Do you mean a feature in terms of skills I did or did not have, or in terms of things that I believed in or did not believe in?
I guess it'd be more like skills you did or didn't have. I mean, unless you have an example for both, that would be better.
So there was this battlefield. It was known as Battlefield for Gilneas, all right? And that was basically copy and pasting Arathi Basin and making some tweaks and tuning to it. And I had severe reservations about the map layout specifically. And so I spent like, I don't know, a lot of time basically going to the lead level designer and things like that, be like, hey, we need to change this map, change this map, change this map. Eventually I was just like, hey, we're not changing this map, we got to finish this. And then I realized the best thing I could do was, get it out and play tested and in front of the team so that they could decide if it was what they wanted to make or not. That was a bit of a tough pill. It's never fun to be told, hey, we're going the other direction. But sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, and that's what you have to do, just part of being a team member. On the other side, out of my skill zone, okay. So I did a lot of combat mechanics, right? I did boss abilities, things like that, and that's how I built my identity, was as a mechanics / combat designer. And there was a large event in front of the Dark Portal for the Burning Crusade expansion. Basically a bunch of demons walking up the row, purely cinematic, and it didn't need to actually have any gameplay whatsoever, right? But it needed to be all about looking good and making the monsters spread out and basically making a very, very well coordinated puppet show, right? In that case, what I did is I actually was very fortunate to be working with a senior designer named Michael Heiberg, who reminded me of these goals. And then when I worried about things like damage numbers, and he was like, no. Just this is here to make the environment exciting and beautiful. Remember your goals and stick to that, and make sure whatever you're doing is in pursuit of interesting visually, not interesting mechanically. And that took longer than I would like to admit, but he was incredibly patient with me. That's how I got through that one. Blue shirt.
If someone has, say, an idea for a champion suggestion or a quality change, how do you think is the best way for them to suggest it
to me?
Twitter or like a nice forum post, or getting someone's attention?
So it's tough, right? Because there's a lot of ideas and a lot of people. And so how do you get an idea in front of the right people? Generally, it's about getting other people who are interested in your ideas and agree with them to work together with you on the forum post or the presentation. And if it hits kind of enough visibility, it will just kind of be escalated either through the forum system or through Twitter or things like that. Sometimes people have personal relationships where they can basically walk around the office and be like, hey, I've got this idea for a bard. A bard? What do you mean? Right? And then those kind of things just naturally happen and grow. Actually, one of the cool things about when I was working at Riot was they had this thing that was basically hot or not. And you could post your champion idea with a little drawing and a description of the mechanics or the fantasy of that character. And people would thumbs up or thumbs down it across the company. And every 3 months or so, they would sift out the top ideas and take them to the team that was actually working on the boss abilities, mechanics, things like that, and say, hey, is this a champion we want to make? Does it conflict with other champions we want? And then they would bring in the people who came up with that idea and had them participate in that meeting. And that was really, really rad.
I asked because I actually did make a forum post about
Yeah.
technology before 17.
Uh-huh.
I asked Riot Bacon and she suggested it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
All right, so Riot Bacon Hawk is Heather. So what she probably did was saw the post, because she's a fantastic thread reader. And that's not even her job. She just does it because she loves it. So she probably found some of the designers on the live balance team or the mechanics Swift, and then sent them an email directly with a link to your post. In that case, that probably was as visible as you could have gotten it. Now, the issue is that there are 100 something million, right, of you guys, and there's 10 guys in the balance pit, right? That's a really, really high ratio. So getting responses, it's really hard. It has to be really pivotal and impactful to the point where like, holy shit, I want to hire this guy. Or it needs to be, oh, hey, this is clear and obvious, so we can act on it and be like, yeah, oh, I'll go fix that bug now, like, a targeting indicator or reticle type of thing. Yes. Yes. You first. You had your hand up last time. Then we'll go to your friend next to you.
Since you work always with teams, has there been any times that an idea, everybody agrees upon the idea,
Yep.
but there's always that one person, just the rock, that just doesn't agree, or have you been in a situation that you don't agree with that idea?
Yes. In fact, we're going to talk about a time where I was that person. Okay. In season 4, we were working on the idea of giving everyone a ward slot, right? A slot where you can basically put an item in there. And we had these wards. One was a blue ward, one was a pink ward, and one was a yellow ward, right? And they all did different things. I'm not going to go over the details of what it was. But I was in charge of taking over that system from another designer who had personal issues and had to go take care of some stuff. And I was adamant those things needed to cost gold. It needed to cost 35 gold that you buy your trinket when it comes out, okay? And people came to like, why don't we just make this free? I don't want to have to think about whether I take a potion or not with me to lane. It's really weird. How do I evaluate whether a ward or a potion? I'm like, no, you don't understand. If we make this cost 0 gold, no one will appreciate it. My God, don't you see how important this is? And look, yeah, see, you all laugh now because you know how ridiculous and how you still really care which one you pick going to lane, even though it doesn't have a gold cost, right? And I had come off of Warcraft where we'd had these things where they were kind of reagent items, flasks and things like that. And it had depreciated in value such that no one actually went to the effort of making them. They all just went to the auction house and bought them. I was afraid of something like that where people didn't put value in things because they didn't put effort into getting them. But I was just wrong. I was just flat out wrong, right? And so the way that resolved was Bradford Wenban, who's a brilliant guy, kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, but I'm a huge pain in the ass a lot of the times, came to me and said, Alex, let's sit down and talk this out. And we got to a point where we were sitting there shouting at each other, right, in a meeting room, and Ryan Scott, who is Morello, came over. He's like, are you guys okay? And we're like, yeah, what's going on? He's like, this doesn't sound like okay. And so he sat down and said, hey, so let's go through this. And I was like, I saw this happen. It really worried me. And Bradford said, man, I hear these feedback from the dev team, the QA team, and I don't see changes happening on it, and that worries me. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, I wasn't aware of that. And I was like, and so he's like, well, what are our options here? Options could be to leave the cost in. The options could be to take it out. And then Ryan sat down and said, well, Alex, if you are wrong, what is the worst thing that can happen? I was like, well, people never buy these items and don't buy into the system. He's like, okay. If you are right, what is the worst thing that could happen? People will go to lane with one too many potions. It's like, well, I'm like, oh. And we realized, okay, let's do it. Let's make the change. Made the change that night. Next morning, people were like, oh man, when do I want to use this blue one? The questions they started asking weren't about why does it have gold, but how do I use it? And generally, that's the trigger that you've finally gotten past up the roadblock. Is people start engaging in the logical, strategic decision, not the resistance question, right? And I was really glad I went through that because I had a lot more respect for Brad after going through that. I realized that, so let's think, we both rubbed each other the wrong way. We had respect for each other, but we both rubbed each other the wrong way in that conversation. But, he actually going through the effort of trying to understand what it was that was making me so stubborn and resistant about making what is a very small tweak, helped me understand that his investment and interest was in me and helping me understand what was bothering me here too. And when I understood what was bothering me, it was way easier to realize, oh, wow, this is clearly the right decision now, or at least it's the right decision to try now, and it's really easy to go back on. That's it. If you have that person in your team, you need to figure out where their heart's at. What is that thing that they're holding on to that's really important? It's usually either a matter of identity, that they identify as a certain type of person and don't want to make that change because it violates that identity, or they don't kind of have a sense for the value of it relative to other things they could be doing. And it's generally in those two buckets. There's other cases, but look there. Yes?
I'm in the process of applying for the Riot internship for the summer.
Yes.
And before I send the application off, I was just wondering, do you have any suggestions, tips, anything?
Do an awesome job. In case this isn't clear, I've actually left Riot a month ago to go start my own company thing. But the simple truth is that a lot of the filtering that happens on that comes from how high are the quality of the stuff that you're presenting with your resume. Do you showcasing, right? I won't go through the whole stack here, but kind of like going from bottom to top, right? Are you doing things for the right reason? Are you then also able to follow through on the right things? Are these things built within a framework and system that are appropriate for the game that you're creating? And then lastly, this is mostly for lead roles. Are you doing this in a way that builds your team, right? Makes them better, focuses on their successes rather than just your personal agenda or drive, right? Excuse me. So I'd say if you take yourself through the same train of thought, ask yourself those same questions that were there at the end. Just do that past 3 or 4 times and have that heart-to-heart with what you're creating. I think you'll go much farther. You're welcome. All right. Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you guys very much.